the best pasta I've had. We just arrived in Rome and we're trying to figure out how to get into our Airbnb.
Hello and welcome to Rome. The Airbnb we stayed at was very cozy and we could tell that the host put a lot of thought into this place. She left a very comprehensive guidebook and there was even a checklist on the door. And as usual, the first thing we did was find food. The Airbnb was in the Monte area, which is quite central.
So we recently landed in Italy and I'm just in shock at the fact that the Colosseum is right down the road over there and the weather is amazing. It feels like summer, but it's like not too hot. I'm so happy.
This was my first time in Italy, so I didn't know what to expect when it came to food here. Obviously, the majority of people love food in Italy, but I have spoken to a small minority who didn't so much enjoy the food because Italian food in Australia and the US is quite Americanized, so it tastes very different to authentic Italian food. Luckily, my first taste of an authentic Italian pizza didn't leave me disappointed.
Only in Rome do you just walk upon an ancient excavation site. It's just...
Rome is such a delight to walk around because you've got these grand historic buildings at every corner and everyone here just has such a happy and carefree energy, likely because a lot of people here are on their dream holiday, and it was also a very lovely sunny day that day.
Currently trying the best tiramisu in Italy. Well, alright, it's very, this is like nothing I've tried, the texture.
Right, don't be too full because we're going to gelato next.
After tiramisu, we did not stop eating and went on a hunt for gelato. I found this gelato place on Reddit and I had very high expectations because this is Italy and, you know, how bad can gelato be here? But I think we were just again not used to the richness of the flavour. I made the mistake of getting the dark chocolate flavour, which was very overwhelming to say the least.
I think so. That's such a cool magnet. No? He's gonna go try some cheese.
Before sunset, we visited the Castel St Angelo, which was the former mausoleum for the Roman Emperor Hadrian and his family. But it has served many different roles throughout history, including as a fortress, a prison, a papal residence, and it's now a museum. There's a dark and windy corridor on the way up to the mausoleum, which is quite creepy and was one of the few times on this trip that I was glad other tourists were present. There's actually a fortified corridor that connects this building to the Vatican, and popes used to use this corridor to flee to the fortress during war and sieges. It's a little bit of a trek up to the top, but once we got up there, we were treated to just the most magnificent sunset over Rome. Unfortunately, we couldn't see the Colosseum from here, but you can see many of Rome's iconic landmarks, including the Vatican. After all that walking up the stairs, we were starving. Luckily, this small restaurant we found didn't have a huge line outside, and one thing I really miss about Italy is these small family-run restaurants that just feel so welcoming and cozy. This particular place is known for their pasta.
So, am I meant to mix this at all?
Oh, I'm so jealous.
Felix was kind enough to let me start with the carbonara, but he was eyeing the carbonara the entire time and was eagerly awaiting his turn. Because the Trevi Fountain was on the way back to the Airbnb, we decided to stop by for a picture, and it was our first taste, though not the last, of the tourism madness in Italy.
We just arrived at the Vatican and I've just never seen a queue this long to get into a tourist attraction. It's crazy.
The next day was our Vatican Museum day. Thankfully, we managed to buy last-minute tickets the week before, so we weren't amongst the poor souls waiting in this massive line outside for tickets. I have such mixed feelings on the Vatican. On one hand, I think it has the most stunning and awe-inspiring pieces of art and just so much history, obviously. But on the other hand, it is just simply overflowing with tourists, and it was hard at times to appreciate the art on display.
What is this?
The Australian history education is quite poor, so I'm glad that I read up a little on the history behind some of these most famous pieces on display the night before, and I made a little bit of a mental bucket list of things I wanted to see. The gallery of maps was at the very top of my bucket list. The second major piece on my bucket list was the School of Athens by Raphael, and it's way bigger than I expected. It's kind of a Where's Wally of history's greatest philosophers and scientists from the ancient times and the Renaissance.
So we just came out of Sistine Chapel, and I'm not going to lie, it was a little bit underwhelming just because there was so many people there and you could barely pause and look at the art. In the middle of the chapel, they herded everyone there, and it was just like a mosh pit. It was crazy. I've never seen so many people in an art museum at the same time. Luckily, the art was obviously on the ceiling, so you could look up and actually see it, whereas the other famous works around this museum, I couldn't even see the actual sculpture because there was so many people crowding around it.
One thing that somewhat surprised us was how commercialized the Vatican is for what is, technically a religious institution. There was a lot of merch on sale for outrageous prices, and it reminded us of how controversial the church is. Fortunately, there was a massive line to get into St. Paul's Basilica, so we just gave up and ended up admiring the view from the outside.
This is the entire duration of the line.
After going through the Vatican, we actually weren't in the best of spirits because a lot of the museum just felt so overcrowded, and it was nice to finally be able to find some peace at this restaurant. Even though it is one of Rome's most popular restaurants, we managed to get a spot because we did come quite late in the afternoon, and this was also the first time we realised that Italians finish the pasta sauce on their plate by dipping bread into their plate. From that moment onwards, Felix did the sort of bread in plate thing at every restaurant we went to.
I got myself a chocolate hazelnut smoothie.
I don't see a single Oh, cash. Numerous transformations. In the medieval period, it was
The replica of the statue of Marcus Aurelius. There he is.
We took a bit of a detour on our way back home that night and stumbled on some ancient ruins. This particular ruin is called the Forum of Nerva. It was designed to be a public space, and it really shows how dedicated the Romans were to building up grand and beautiful public spaces.
We're just walking home, and our place is right near the Colosseum, and it is so beautiful at night. You can see it's all lit up. And unlike the other attractions we've seen here in Rome, it's not too crowded at this time near the Colosseum, so you can actually get a decent photo without hordes of tourists around. It's great. We are currently in the Colosseum and we're doing the Rick Steves audio tour. It is pouring today though. The weather is not great.
We got up quite early to see the Colosseum in order to dodge the crowds. It was also raining, which helped with the crowd reduction. While I think guided tours are really valuable, we just used the Rick Steves audio tour, which I think provided a great overview of the history of the Colosseum and the rituals surrounding it in Roman times. The audio tour was very descriptive and it helped with our imagination when it came came to picturing what the Colosseum looked like at the height of the Roman Empire.
Beyond the arch rises Palatine Hill, dotted with umbrella palms. This biggest temple once covered the entire hill. Along either side.
It's hard to display in the pictures or videos just how humongous this monument is, but at its peak, the Colosseum could handle up to 80,000 spectators.
You're good.
As cheesy as this sounds, I found visiting the Forum to be a very eye-opening and perspective-shaping experience. This sounds super pretentious, so let me explain. To see these ruins and imagine how people 2,000 years ago used to live, it reminded me of this quote from Marcus Aurelius' Meditations, which were a series of private diary entries that he wrote through tough times and during battle. Time is a sort of river of passing events, and strong is its current. No sooner is a thing brought to sight than it is swept by and another takes its place, and this too will be swept away. During this trip, I just became fascinated with how the Roman Empire fell into ruins and how Europe eventually entered the quote-unquote Dark Ages. And during that period, parts of the Forum were hidden in marshland and buried within nature, and people lived their lives completely ignorant of the once great empire that had held its seat of power on these hills. It's really quite humbling imagining what my home city might look like in 1,000 years' time, and how even the most sturdy and grand of buildings like the ones in Palatine Hill that once housed emperors, even those structures eventually will fall into ruin. I don't know if this is a common experience, but I walked away from the ruins with a sense of melancholy. Yep, I think that's the best way to describe it. Just a casual existential crisis in the middle of Italy. For lunch that day, everywhere was actually booked and required reservations, so we stumbled into this nice looking restaurant that seemed quite upscale. The food was indeed very expensive, but we didn't have much choice.
Good, but the problem is I've never had risotto before, so I don't know if it's good or bad.
Now, the Pantheon is arguably the most intact piece of ancient architecture, and it's truly crazy to think that the dome is still one of the world's largest, if not the largest, unreinforced concrete dome, 2,000 years after its construction. It really shows how masterful Roman engineers were, particularly in their use of concrete. We went in and just sat staring at the ceiling. That afternoon, we braved the chaos of the Spanish Steps, and you're actually not allowed to sit on the Spanish Steps anymore. I think that's because sitting causes more damage and wear to the stairs, which is understandable, but because of this rule, we didn't get any iconic movie scene photos of us sitting on the stairs. We ended our walk with a sweet reward at this gelato place, which redeemed our opinion of Italian gelato after a not so good first experience.
So they separate out the queue for paying money from the queue for getting ice cream.
Walked in like 2 minutes later.
Our last day in Rome wrapped up with dinner at this beautiful restaurant with wine absolutely everywhere, as you can see. Neither of us drink wine though, so we opted for pasta as always. Also, during dinner, this guy came in and tried selling flowers to the table next to ours. Apparently this is quite common in Italy.
And then got...
Well, that takes us to the end of the Rome vlog. Making this video made me feel so nostalgic and also hungry. I think Rome is definitely a city that I can see myself visiting over and over again and not getting sick of anything. Even some of the attractions we visited, like the Forum, I feel like we barely scratched the surface because we just didn't have enough time. I hope that the next time I return we'll dedicate a bit more time to each attraction and slow down a little. I'm not a superstitious person, but now I really wish that we tossed a coin into the Trevi Fountain, because apparently tossing a coin in there guarantees your return to Rome, which is something I definitely want to guarantee. But anyways, thank you so much for watching.